Hello, everyone. We're on episode 79 now of the Sports Daily College Basketball. Late summer check-in, a bit of a different podcast for everyone out here. I know it's been a while since me, Sean, and Kumar have been together. I think it's been since April, toward the end of the coaching carousel. So if you're just joining us, thank you for tuning in. And now we're just going to go into some overarching themes and some very early preseason narratives, nothing too crazy as we're still a little less than 3 months before the season. So, Mike, any lasting narratives you want to go over since we last talked in late April, besides like transfer portal and coaching carousel stuff?
Yeah, one interesting news headline that's coming out is Kentucky basketball. So they are in the process of completely changing their lineup with a new head coach coming in with Mark Pope in his first season. He's already brought in a lot of really good transfers. He's looking to bring in a few more players, Joe. He's looking to bring in players through some walk-on tryouts. Um, Kentucky hasn't done this in a long time. This is something that Louisville coach Kenny Payne did last year. We saw the TCU Toad Frogs women's team do that in the middle of the year last year when they had a lot of issues with their program. But kind of an interesting headline here to get a few extra players for the Kentucky Wildcats basketball team. Probably more guys are going to be on their third team, on their practice players, but still kind of an interesting headline. And I think that'll kick off a lot of changes that's going to be happening in college basketball this year. Not only with people like Coach Cal leaving to go to Arkansas and new coaches and new players at different places, but new schools in different conferences. It's going to be a really interesting season watching that.
Yeah, of the players are returning for Kentucky last year, so it's going to be a little bit of a different ball game for BBN. Did I lose you
No,
guys there?
totally, Sean. And I
Okay.
know you're cutting in and out. Some Wi-Fi difficulties. No, no, not completely, but no, I think Sean covered a lot of what Mike said, and just for me, I think the overarching theme I've had, especially being our resident Midwestern Big Ten balls after that, so 10, 17 days away, depending on what your college team is for football. So with all that said, I think the way to get excitement back up is to talk about some of these very intriguing early preseason games. So without further ado, um, I'm going to bring up one. It's the Maui Invitational. Talked about a stacked, absolutely loaded slate of games. You're going to have Auburn, Colorado, Dayton, Iowa State, Memphis, Michigan State, UNC, and UConn all in Maui. Um, Mike, any early thoughts on that?
I mean, that's a loaded tournament. Maui Invitational is going to be even better in 2 years when Baylor Bears come and play in it. But you just look at a fantastic tournament every year, and you look at Final Four teams that are going to compete for national championship this year. My belief, to include Kansas and Tennessee, those are the two teams that I'm going to be looking for. And then seeing how this Purdue team is without a lot of players. They lost Zach Edey. They lost also a couple of players in the transfer portal. So it's going to be a new look Purdue team that made the Final Four, was runners up last year. So it's an exciting tournament. No real bad teams this year, except for maybe Chaminade. And you never know. They might pull another upset off one of these days.
Yeah, Shaw, what do you think?
I mean, whenever you can get the defending champs, and being that it's the defending back-to-back champs in the field, you know that it's going to be a good tournament. Now, these fields are filled years in advance, so it's
Yeah.
a little bit of a guessing game for the fields. You know, they have deals with all the conferences that they've got to get. Um, you know, you'll see one team from each of the major conferences in there. Really, sometimes there's a deal with a couple of the smaller conferences, like in Battle for Atlantis. There's one spot for a Missouri Valley or Atlantic 10 team. This year it's going to Davidson. Last year you saw Northern Iowa in there, but um, MTE season is a lot of fun. definitely because it's a preview. College basketball gets a lot of attention that it won't get probably again until late January when college football has wrapped up. But so far, we don't know much about the teams, but we should have a number of really competitive, high-quality MTEs.
Absolutely. I think I want to highlight one more as the main prominent tournament. I think the Maui Invitational, usually every year it's between that and Atlantis for the most prestigious. But I want to highlight a 4-team event now. It's Baha Mar, and it faces two teams. One, which is heavily featured on this podcast, features Michael's own Baylor Bears, the St. John's Red Storm, the Tennessee Volunteers, and the Virginia Cavaliers. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but to me, those are 4 teams that should be shoo-ins for the tournament. And I think that's a great opportunity for each of these teams, especially those who have higher seeding aspirations to get 2 quad 1 wins right off the bat. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, St. John's is going to be a really intriguing team to watch this year. They've got Kadari Richmond now on their squad. It's Pitino's second year, so a couple of those guys that didn't really pan out when he transferred in that mass transfer hall in his first year. I think St. John's is a really interesting team to watch this year. See how physical they'll play, which is typical Rick Pitino style basketball. So we'll see. I'm pulling for my Bears. The Bears reloaded pretty well this offseason, getting a few guys, Jeremy Roach and Roshad. That's going to be a really good 4-day tournament or 2-day.
John, what do you think?
Hey, that's. I'm sorry, guys, for those at home with the connection. It's not great. I can see it here, but we'll see what we can do. But this is as good of a field as this Bahamas tournament has gotten. I don't know how long it's been going on. It's not been long, but they had Miami, K-State, Providence, and one other last year. But this is a big step up from that. Even, those 4 teams. It will be the little brother to the Battle for Atlantis just up the road on Paradise Island. This one's November 21st and 22nd. Atlantis is, let's see here, I think the 27th to the 29th. So they're not going on at the same time, which is good for the people down in the Bahamas. But, that the Caribbean country is getting 2 really, really good MTEs, which is good to see for the college basketball fan.
Yeah, Battle for Atlantis has a few interesting teams. Arizona, they're going to be good this year, as well as Indiana, who reloaded really nicely in the transfer portal, in Gonzaga. There are a couple of teams, though, that kind of scratch your head that they made it into the field. Louisville's been at the bottom of the ACC a couple of times. West Virginia is Oklahoma, who I don't have great expectations for this year, but that'll still be an interesting. That seems very top heavy this year. Battle for Atlantis, when I'm looking at it.
Yeah, Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think you just read my mind and stole my next question. I think, reading off those 8 teams, it seems like those are all perennial teams on an average year. Just forget that we're in 2024 for a second, that you'd expect to see in the tournament. But I just want to ask a really fun hypothetical right now between Arizona, and I'm going to list them slowly for our viewers too, so you can answer the question. Arizona, Creighton, Davidson, Gonzaga, Indiana, Louisville, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. The 8 teams I listed off. I think
Creighton
Mike,
actually jumped out of that.
Answer.
It's Providence now. Remember Creighton had
Providence.
that. Yeah. There was a little issue with that from the Big East point of view. Oh, wait, no. Maybe it was the other way around.
Yes. Thank you, Sean.
No, I think I might be wrong.
I believe it is Creighton.
Yeah, so Providence jumped out. That's right.
Yes, so it would be Creighton. So I think with all that said, guys, of those 8 teams, how many get into the NCAA tournament? Just the earliest guesstimate right now.
Going with 3.
Yeah, three is probably the safe
the
answer. 8. Maybe 4. You could talk.
Arizona, Gonzaga, Indiana, I think are shoes in. Maybe Providence.
Well,
but I
it's
don't think
Creighton.
Davidson's getting in. I certainly don't think West Virginia in year one will, although they've got a competitive team.
I think it's
Guys,
4.
I'm gonna have to
I think it's 4.
4. Yeah, yeah. I have to push back strongly even on 4 shot. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Louisville might make the
I
tournament too, to be
Yeah, that's what
honest.
I'm saying, guys. I mean, I understand West Virginia and Louisville. You're in the first year of the Kelsey and DeVries era, but my gosh, I mean, the talent of all these teams is enough to make the tournament on any given year. So, I truthfully thought you guys would answer 6 or 7, because the only team I could make an argument for even
Wow.
being close to out of there is perhaps Louisville because of what they've had to redo, and West Virginia because of the brutality of the Big 12. But between Oklahoma, Indiana, Gonzaga, I mean, Davidson, maybe you're scratching your head a little. I think enough of those teams are going to make up for that, and I think 6 of those 8 teams, before all is said and done, will hear their name on Selection Sunday. But I think we can come back to this later, in terms of a friendly debate, guys. I want to uh, get off the MTEs for a second, and I do want to talk about greater matchups in the field. And I want to start off with Oklahoma, and I think they're a really intriguing team. I think last year a lot of people thought they got slighted, whether that's fair or not. We're on to this year. So a bit of a tool for the Sooners. You got to remember they're in the SEC now, so a lot of these games I'm mentioning, you're going to scratch your head wondering why I'm saying they're out of conference. So first game for them out of conference, uh, besides Atlantis, is going to be Georgia Tech at home, Oklahoma State on a neutral floor, Michigan on a neutral floor, and then you will have the 3 games in Atlanta. So I've just laid out 6 games for the Sooners, and keep in mind they do play in the SEC. Uh, Considering that they will probably be a borderline bubble team, or even a team that would have to stretch to be a bubble team. Of those 6 games, how many would they have to win right now? Do you think to feel really good about their non-conference slate?
I think 3 is the correct
I mean,
answer. It really does depend, though.
yeah. I mean, Georgia Tech and Oklahoma State aren't particularly good wins, I don't think. Oklahoma State didn't really rebuild this year. They're going to expect to be at the bottom of the Big 12, and Georgia Tech, I think, more of the same again this year for them. So, I mean, if they go sputter at 8-10 in the SEC, I think they probably have to win 4 of those games.
Well,
Yeah,
the
keep
Georgia
about
Tech game,
5 now.
remember, is the Javion McCullum game. He swapped Oklahoma for the Yellow Jackets.
Yes,
So
yes, it is.
that's an interesting one. Um, you'd like to say you need one win against a tournament team, and the 3 non-Atlantis games there might not be tournament teams there for the Sooners. So, it really non-conference schedule totally depends on what that team does and with the rest of their season. And sometimes you get lucky with that, sometimes you don't. But 3 or 4, I think, is the number that they'll be looking at if they want to make the big dance.
100%. Mike, I want this one to be, I want you to answer this one first because this is a really interesting one I've thought about all day. The Kansas State Wildcats, I think 2 years ago, one of the massive overperformers in all of the sport. And now a team that has intriguing off preseason schedule. So they do play in the Peach Jam. And for anyone who is wondering, Paradise Jam, I'm sorry. For all those teams in there, it's no one that great. UAB, Liberty, George Washington, Illinois State, McNeese, respectable enough. I do understand that. But aside from those games, they only do play LSU, St. John's, Drake, and Wichita State. And keep in mind, Drake and Wichita State, based on Bart Torvik right now, wouldn't even be quad 1 or 2 games. So what's your take on their non-conference schedule as a whole, as it stands right now? And between LSU, St. John's, and we'll just call it Drake and Wichita State, how many of those games do they have to win? I feel like it's 3 or 4.
They got to win a lot. I think this is actually a really good K-State team. Huge pickup with Coleman Hawkins in the transfer portal. They also got a center from Kentucky. You got Onyezo. So this is a good team that got some good pickups. With that being said, Kansas State, this is more of the same for them. Even before Coach Tang, when they had Bruce Weber coaching, they've always taken an easier route in the out of conference. I remember 2 years ago they went undefeated in the out of conference. They still weren't even ranked because they didn't have any impressive wins. With that being said, St. John's would be an impressive win. And who knows, maybe Drake or Wichita are good teams, but if they're sitting on the bubble and they have a loss in the out of conference outside of, I don't know, we'll call it St. John's and maybe LSU, that's going to be a bad loss. So they're going to have a good out of conference with them not really playing that many good teams. Caveat to that is that they get to play in the best conference of college basketball going on into the season. So, you know, the road gets a lot tougher for them going forward once they get into January.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sean.
With K-State, Joe, you mentioned those Torvik numbers. The Drake game is a neutral, and Wichita is a true road game. So while they are outside the top 100 now, not a ton of work to get Wichita to 75 for a quad one win, and then Drake from 118. That's probably going to stay quad two. You got to get to 50 for a neutral to be a quad one. So, they're solidly favored in those. Obviously, the St. John's away game would definitely be a quad one.
I don't know if y'all been campus.
What's that, Mike?
I was going to say, Wichita's campus, that's a tough place to play, especially playing an early out-of-conference game. That's a really tough place, and even though K-State Manhattan's right down the road, they're not going to be having any fans in that stadium. It's going to be sold out in black and gold.
And looking at their Big 12 schedule here, with the addition of teams in all the big conferences, basically the number of games or teams that you have to play twice decreases. Well, guess what? They get Kansas twice, and they get Iowa State twice. So the Wildcats are going to have a lot of opportunities for big wins, but also if it comes down to they lose 2-3 games in the non-conference, we might be looking at a wins-losses issue straight up with the Wildcats. Now that's a whole different story that we can talk about another day. How many team games over 500 does a team need to be in the new look 18-team mega conference college basketball landscape to make the tournament? But you got Doug McDaniel from Michigan, you got Achor from Sanford, Coleman, Onyenso, as Mike said. There's enough here for Kansas State to at least make the tournament. Tang's done it with less before.
Yeah, Sean, thank you for that, and thank you for again reminding me of Doug McDaniel. He reminds himself to go to class or do something at Kansas State, but I'm gonna get off that high horse for now. I want to talk about a perennial blue blood, and we can do blood. I want to talk about the Villanova Wildcats. I think it's a team that didn't get a whole lot of press this offseason. I do think they would have gotten a whole lot of negative press if Eric Dixon decided to not go back there. So really good on Kyle Neptune and whoever the heck runs Villanova's NIL that did not happen. Very non-impressive schedule, kind of like Kansas State to have for a non-conference. They have a neutral game against Virginia on a Friday night in early November, another neutral against Maryland, and then a home game against Cincinnati. Guys, I am really unmoved by Villanova's non-conference. They play more Ivy Leagues. They play as many Ivy Leagues guys as schools that are in Power 5 or Power 6 conferences. That is not great. What are your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, remember what Villanova last year, the games against competitive teams in the out-of-conference are what saved them. They played terrible against St. Joe's and UPenn, losing those games, and then they had some big wins against good out-of-conference teams. But they're also losing a lot of good players. TJ Bamba, they lost to Oregon. Brennan Hausen, they lost to K-State, who we were just talking about. And they got one more good player in the portal, Lance Ware, who will be leaving, not sure to where. Villanova for the third straight year is just incredibly non-exciting going into the conference season. You wonder when they're going to make a a coaching change away because the post Jay Wright era has not been kind to the Cats.
And in terms of a talent perspective, guys, they are way less talented than they were last year. And last year, they weren't that talented. Dixon's back, which is okay, but when it comes down to it, like, he's a great player, but he's not like going to surprise you. There's too much data. He's played 4 years of college basketball. He's had a couple really, in terms of him being the only guy they can get the ball to. I don't think he's that guy. So their schedule is underwhelming. Their team is underwhelming. They were 0-3 in the Big Five last year. Now you'd like to see an improvement in that department, but the Cincinnati at home. Cincinnati doesn't have a great year. That's not going to be a Q1. You have Maryland on a neutral. Maryland doesn't have a good year. That's not a Q1. So I think it's very possible that Villanova doesn't have a quad one game on their schedule in the non-conference. And now they'll get plenty of opportunities in the Big East, that's for sure. But I think what Mike teased at, a potential vacancy in Villanova, Pennsylvania, March or April of next year. I think that's where they're headed.
Yeah, remember, this wasn't a very exciting coaching hire either. Before coming to know, Coach had one season at Temple that was incredibly unimpressive. I don't think there's a whole lot of excitement about this team right now.
Yeah, and just one thing to add there, Mike, about Kyle Neptune. I think a lot of fears. It's funny. I hate to relate this to Michigan football, even to the slightest, but the runway Michigan's new coach Sherrod Moore had was a lot better in terms of being an interim coach while Harbaugh was suspended. Because Kyle Neptune's, I guess, interim run was in the Bronx, New York, at Fordham and Rose Hill. I don't think that. Yeah, no, I don't think that equates to taking over a top 10 job in college basketball. Because certainly, say what you want about Villanova historically, getting any hit program handed to you by Jay Wright is a top 10 job. You can even argue to be top 5, and I wouldn't object with many arguments. Guys, I want to finish out with two more teams, and we're going to keep doing this segment because I think a lot of people were excited about it. I want to talk about a team last year who, similar to Villanova and Kansas State, had a very light non-conference schedule. I'm talking about the Ole Miss Rebels. I'm looking at this schedule here, and I think this year there's a lot more intriguing games than you would think. They have a neutral game against BYU, and I'm just confirming their tournament status right now. Aside from that, they do have a neutral game against Louisville, which is another team that is completely unknown. And then an away game against Memphis. Guys, looking at this, as of right now, three games that are likely to be quad one in the non-conference. And again, we can hedge this with the SEC is going to be loaded with teams. But three teams quad one, Ole Miss for a team that pretty much got burned for not playing anyone good in non-conference last year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we did see Ole Miss kind of seem like their true colors in the SEC season. Look, I think still it was a great first year under one of the top coaches in college basketball. I'll say that first off. This year, it will be interesting to watch because of how many players they lost in the portal. They lost 5 of their guys, and they transferred to good schools. They're not just transferring out. Some of them going to Illinois State. Rashad Marshall went to Arkansas State. Nothing great there, but Brandon Murray goes to McNeese State. That's a good school, Brought in a couple of good players. Sean Padula, for one, coming from Virginia Tech, and Davon Barnes, the leading scorer from Sam Houston. But I would expect them to be competitive. I still don't know if they're a tournament team. I think time will tell, and we haven't seen much out of these transfers in much of college basketball scene yet.
Yeah, with Chris Beard, there's enough data at a couple different schools that he typically doesn't do that with the non-conference. And I don't think anybody really expected them to be all that good last year, and they ended up not being that good. But
No.
they won a couple close games against low majors there, and they ended up getting, I think they were one of the last teams to lose their first game. They ended up getting ranked, and eventually water found its level there. But, you know, you get Jalen Murray, you still have you get Dre Davis from Seton Hall, the other transfers that Mike said. Like, I think there's a little more there this year than there was last year. And, those quad one opportunities looking like three. You get 2 true road games, and then you get the neutral against BYU. Louisville's 63rd right now. That's a true road game, so all that has to do is stay in the top 75 to be one. I think there's a great chance you get 3 quad one non-home, non-conference games here, and that's what the committee likes, especially over the last 2 years. They really like away wins. It's bumps teams up a whole seed line in the past, so it seems to me as of now that Chris Beard and the AD at Ole Miss might be learning their lesson from what happened last year.
Yeah. Guys, I want to end on this. It's going to be Michigan, but I will have zero input. All I will do is lay out the scene because, I think a lot of our viewers in Midwest country are curious about this because I think Michigan objectively has the most intriguing off-season schedule. And by intriguing, I also mean difficult preseason schedule to Big Ten play. I'm going to lay out the scene, and then I'm not going to say another word after it. They start off the first Sunday of the season, neutral court in Greensboro against Wake Forest. That will be a quad one game as it stands.
That's the return game that's going to
by a home game
LCA, right?
TCU Horned Frogs.
That's yes. The return game? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Shot is correct there. So, Wake Forest followed by a home game against TCU, another team with a bunch of new faces. Frankie Collins' homecoming game, too, after a while. They do go to Fort Myers, where they'll play Virginia Tech and one of Xavier or South Carolina. Neutral game against Arkansas, and then a neutral game against Oklahoma. So Dusty May, year one, 6 non-conference games that are borderline quad one, if not quad 2 games. For a team that's probably going to define success by making the tournament. I don't think anyone's going to be that mad if they don't. But success for year one is making the tournament. 6 premier non-conference games. Mike, how many do they have to win, and how many do you expect them to win?
Joe, this is a different Michigan team, but Michigan teams in the years lost a game or two in non-conference that they really should not lose. So that being said, I'm going to say that they got to win 4 or 6 because I expect them to cough up 2 games that they shouldn't.
Well, that's one of the positives.
Say you.
Interesting.
It's one of the positives, Mike, of playing 6 actual non-conference games is that there's less cupcakes that you can choke on, which unfortunately for your Wolverines, Joe, happened last year. Now, McNeese State was a really good team and probably was a top 25 team. And to be fair, we did see that coming 100%. But, I'm looking at 3. The fact that one of the 6 games is home helps for sure. That the Cal game on a neutral. Do you know where that happens to be, Joe? The Arkansas neutral
Madison
game.
Square Garden.
Okay, so kind of a true neutral.
That's a Michigan home game.
Maybe a lean Michigan, but still, like it's not at LCA, and we're calling it. But look, I think Michigan is one of the biggest question marks out there, maybe of any team. They have a brand new staff, a brand new team, a couple of players who played for that team or that coach before, but I think you're going to see Michigan in some early top 25s, and then I think you're going to see them out of some early bracketologies. The jury is really out on Michigan, but I think we're going to know pretty quick. They're playing 4 of their 6, marquee non-conference games before the end of November. Like we could figure out a lot about Michigan, by the time Feast Week is over.
100%, Sean. Guys, I do want to wrap this up, and I do want to caveat this with we will go through more teams in the coming weeks. We still have a decent runway before the season. We will go over Indiana, which Sean will give us probably more in-depth analysis than anyone can, and hopefully with better Wi-Fi for all of us, we will get through a lot more teams, and including the ACC, because I know the will not be happy we excluded the former premier conference in college basketball. But guys, any closing thoughts before we go?
Hey, let's get ready for a good season.
Yep, should be fun. We're about a little less than 3 months out. We're going to try and get as much preview content in there as we can. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.